Hey, all my sweet little children. Hope you guys are all well. Still, your families are all well. You guys are following the rules of social distancing, praying every night that this thing's going to be over soon. And just getting some sunlight every day and some exercise. I miss you guys so much. I can't wait until we can be together again, right? To finish our year that we actually started. So, chapter 9, we left off with last time. Winnie had just met Daddy Tuck. What's what we'll call him? Daddy Tuck, right? And surprisingly enough, he was very excited to meet her and received her very well. And she was playing with the boys and kind of getting used to life with them more quickly than you would expect since they actually did kidnap her, right? So we're going to get started with chapter 10. It says, Winnie had grown up with order. She was used to it. Under the pitiless double assaults of her mother and grandmother, the cottage where she lived was always squeaking clean, mopped and swept and scoured into limp submission. There was no room for carelessness, no putting things off until later. The foster women had made a fortress out of duty. Within it, they were indomitable, and Winnie was in training. So she was prepared for the homely little house beside the pond, unprepared for the gentle eddies of the dust, the silver cobwebs, and a mouse who lived, and welcome to him, in a table drawer. There were only 3 rooms. The kitchen came first, with an open cabinet where dishes were stacked in perilous towers without the last regard for their varying dimensions. There was an enormous black stove and a metal sink, and every surface, every wall, was piled and strewn and hung with everything imaginable, from onions to lanterns to wooden spoons to washtubs, and in a corner stood Tuck's forgotten shotgun. The parlor came next, where their furniture, loose and sloping with age, was set about helter-skelter, that means kind of chaotically. An ancient green plush sofa lolled alone in the center, like yet another mossy fallen log, facing a soot-streaked fireplace, still deep in last winter's ashes. The table with a drawer that housed the mouse was pushed off, also alone in a far corner, and 3 armchairs and an elderly rocker stood about aimlessly, like strangers at a party, ignoring each other. So what we know about them so far is they're really messy, right? Not so much caring about keeping anything clean. Beyond this was the bedroom, where a vast and tipsy brass bed took up most of its space, but there was room beside it for the washstand with a lonely mirror, the opposite its foot a cavernous oak wardrobe from which leaked the faint smell of camphor. Up a steep flight of narrow stairs was a dusty loft. That's where the boys sleep when they're home, May exclaimed. And that was all. And yet it was not quite all, for there was everywhere evidence of their activities. May and Tuck's, her sewing, patches and scraps of bright cloth, half-completed quilts and braided rugs, a bag of cotton batting with wisps of its contents like snow drifting into cracks and corners, the arms of the sofa webbed with strands of thread and dangerous with needles. His wood carving, curly shavings furring the floor, and little heaps of splinters and chips, every surface dim with the sawdust of countless sandings. Limbs of unassembled dolls and wooden soldiers, a ship model propped on the mouse's table, waiting for its glue to dry, and a stack of wooden bowls, their sides smooth to velvet. The topmost bowl filled with a jumble of big wooden spoons and forks like dry bleached bones. "We make things to sell," said May, surveying the mess approvingly. And still this was not all, for on the old beamed ceiling of the parlor streaks of light swam and danced and wavered like a bright mirage, reflected through the windows from the sunlit surface of the pond. There were bowls of daisies everywhere, gay white and yellow, And everything was the clean, sweet smell of the water and its weeds, the chatter of a swooping kingfisher, the carol and trill of a dozen other kinds of birds, and occasionally the trilling bass note of an unastonished bullfrog at ease from somewhere along the muddy banks. They just said frog, dude. Into it all came Winnie, eyes wide and very much amazed. It was a whole new idea to her that people could live in such disarray, but at the same time she was charmed. It was comfortable. Climbing behind May up the stairs to see the loft, she thought of herself. Maybe it's because they think they have forever to clean it up. And this was followed by another thought, far more revolutionary. Maybe they just don't care. The boys don't be home very much, said May as they came into the half-light of the loft. But when they are, they bed up here. There's plenty of room. The loft was cluttered too with all kinds of odds and ends, but there were 2 mattresses rolled out on the floor. The fresh sheets and blankets were folded almost neatly on each, waiting to be spread. Where do they go when they are away? Asked Winnie. What do they do? Oh, said May, they go different places, do different things. They work at what jobs they can get to bring home some of their money. Miles can do carpentering, and he's a pretty fair blacksmith, too. Jesse now, he don't ever seem too settled in himself. Of course he's young. She stopped and smiled. That sounds funny, don't it? Still, it's true, just the same. So Jesse, he does what strikes him at the moment, working in the fields, in the saloons, things like that, wherever he comes across. But they can't stay in one place for very long, you know. None of us can. People get to wondering, she sighed. We've been in this house about as long as we dare, going on 20 years. It's a right nice place. Tusk got so he's real attached to it. Then, too, it's off by itself. Plenty of fish in the pond, not too far from the towns around. When we need things, we go sometimes to one, sometimes the next, so people don't come to notice us much, as we sell where we can. But I guess we'll be moving on one of these days. It's just about that time. It sounded rather sad to Winnie never to belong anywhere. That's too bad, she said, glancing shyly at May. Always moving around and never having any friends or anything. But May shrugged off this observation. Tuck and me, we got each other, she said, and that's a lot. The boys now, they go their separate ways. They're some different, don't always get on too good. But they come home whenever their spirit moves, and every 10 years, first week of August, they meet at the spring and come home together, so we can be a family again for a little while. That's why we was there this morning. On one way or another, it all works out. She folded her arms and nodded, more to herself than to Winnie. Life's got to be lived, no matter how long or short, she said calmly. You got to take what comes. We just go along like everybody else, one day at a time. Funny, we don't feel no different. Leastways, I don't. Sometimes I forget about what's happened to us. Forget it altogether, and then sometimes it comes over me and I wonder what's happened to us. We're plain as salt, as tucks. We don't deserve no blessings, if it's a blessing. And likewise, I don't see how we deserve to be cursed, if it is a curse. Still, there's no use trying to figure out why things fall or the way they do. Things just are, and fussing doesn't bring changes. Tuck, now he's got a few other ideas, but I expect he'll tell you. There, the boys are in from the pond. Winnie heard a burst of voices downstairs, and in a moment Miles and Jessie were climbing to the loft. Here, Charles, said Mom hastily. Hide your eyes. Boys, are you decent? What'd you put on to swim in? I got Winnie up here. Do you hear me? For goodness sakes, Ma, said Jessie, emerging from the stairwell. You think we're going to march around in our all together with Winnie Foster in the house? And Miles behind him said, we just jumped in with our clothes on. Too hot and tired to shed 'em. It was true. They stood there side by side with their clothes plastered to their skins, little pools of water collecting at their feet. Well, said May, relieved, all right. Find something dry to put on. Your pa's got supper nearly ready. And she hustled Winnie down the narrow stairs. Chapter 11. It was a good supper. Flapjacks, pancakes, bacon, bread, and applesauce. but they ate sitting around in the parlor instead of around a table. Winnie had never had a meal that way before, and she watched them carefully at first to see what rules there might be that she did not know about. But there seemed to be no rules. Jessie sat on the floor and used the seat of a chair for a table, but the others held their plates in their laps. There were no napkins. It was all right then to lick the maple syrup from your fingers. Winnie was never allowed to do such a thing at home, but she had always thought it would be the easiest way, and suddenly the meal seemed luxurious. After a few minutes, however, it was clear to Winnie that there was at least one rule. As long as there was food to eat, there was no conversation. All four Tucks kept their eyes and their attention on the business at hand, and in the silence, given time to think, Winnie felt her elation and her thoughtfulness pleasure wobble and collapse. She was thinking a lot. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Going kind of back and forth. It had been different when they were out of doors, where the world belonged to everyone and no one. Here everything was theirs alone. Everything was done their way. Eating, she realized now, was a very personal thing, not something to do with strangers. Chewing was a personal thing, yet she was chewing with strangers in a strange place. She shivered a little and frowned, looking around at them. That story they told her, why they were crazy, she thought harshly, and they were criminals. They had kidnapped her right out in the middle of their very own wood, and now she would be expected to sleep all night in this dirty, peculiar house. She had never slept in any bed but her own in her life. All these thoughts flowed at once from the dark part of her mind. She put down her fork and unsteadily said, "I want to go home." The Tuck stopped eating and looked at her, surprised. May said soothingly, "Why, of course you do, child. That's only natural. I'll take you home. I promised I would. Soon as we've explained a bit as to why, you got to promise you'll never tell about the spring. That's the only reason we brung you here. We got to make you see why." Then Miles said cheerfully and with sudden sympathy, "There's a pretty good old rowboat. I'll take you up for a row after supper." "No, I will," said Jessie. "Let me. I found her first, didn't I? Winnie Foster. Listen, I'll show you where the frogs are and—" "Hush!" Tuck interrupted. "Everyone hush! I'll take Winnie rowing in the pond. There's a good deal to be said, and I think we better hurry up and say it. I got a feeling there ain't a whole lot of time." Jessie laughed at this and ran a hand roughly through his curls. "That's funny, Pa. Seems to me like time's the only thing we got a lot of." But May frowned. "You worried, Tuck? What's got you?" "No one saw us on the way up." "Well, now wait a bit. Yes, they did, come to think of it. There was a man on the road just outside Tree Gap, but he didn't say anything." "He knows me, though," said Winnie. She had forgotten, too, about the man in the yellow suit, and now thinking of him, she felt a surge of relief. "He'll tell my father he saw me." "He knows you?" said May, her frown deepening. "But you didn't call out to him, child. Why not?" "I was too scared to do anything," said Winnie honestly. Tuck shook his head. "I never thought we'd come to the place where we'd be scaring children," he said. "I guess there's no way to make it up to you, Winnie, but I'm sure most awful sorry it had to happen like that. Who is this man you saw?" "I don't know his name," said Winnie, "but he's a pretty nice man, I guess. In fact, he seems surprisingly nice to her now, a kind of savior." And then she added, "He came to our house last night, but he didn't go inside." "Well, that doesn't sound too serious, Pa," said Miles. "Just some stranger passing by." "Just the same, we gotta get you home again, Winnie," said Tuck, standing up decisively. "We gotta get you home just as fast as we can. I got a feeling this whole thing is gonna come apart like wet bread. But first we gotta talk, and the pond's the best place. The pond's got answers. Come along, child. Let's go out on the water." Okay, so we're at a place now in the book where they're going on a boat ride, right? She's kind of confused. I think her heart wants to stay. Her heart wants to go home. She's scared, but her mind's very curious about what's all happening. So now she's going through an internal struggle. That's what we call it. Remember, we talked about conflict earlier in the year. Man versus man, man versus nature, man versus himself. And so I think this is a very good example right now that Winnie's going through of man versus himself. She's going back and forth. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do I want to go home? Do I not want to go home? What would be the reasons I'd want to go home? Why do these people kidnap me? All of these questions running through her head because she really just doesn't want to settle with these people, but she's not afraid to be there right now at the moment. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen in the next couple of chapters. I will post assignment today, and it'll be a journal prompt, and it'll be your questions as usual. Okay, so be sure when you this week that when you log on, at least one of those days you sign your name. You don't have to do it every day, but at least one of those days from now, between now and Friday, when you log into the computer, I'll put an attendance, a place for you to put your attendance. Go and find that little comment box and put your name first and last in there so that I know you guys checked in, okay? I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Go get some sun. Do something fun. Hey, that rhymes. Alright, I think I'll make that Noah and I's new motto. Go in the sun. Have some fun. Guess what? Swimming pools are going to be really kicking pretty soon, right? I think some of my little nephews and nieces took a dip in my sister's the other day and said it was a little too cold, but it won't be long now. We'll be able to start doing that. And those of us that have pools or know somebody, blessed enough to know somebody that has a pool, some fun in the sun that way. Love you guys. Take care, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.